Good to have you with us. This is ARIRANG News, live from Seoul. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. The top stories making headlines at this hour. With both Koreas expressing a willingness to meet in the new year, prospects for a possible interKorean summit grow. Experts in the U.S., however, warn to take a cautious approach. The Korean economy is in dire need of structural reforms. That's according to the country's finance minister, who pledges once again to follow through on the promises he made last year. And Chinese President Xi Jinping orders an investigation into a stampede that killed dozens on New Year's Eve in Shanghai. The cause of the accident remains unclear. The possibility of an interKorean summit in the new year is being mentioned by the two Koreas. North Korea watchers at home and abroad are keeping their eyes on the exchanges between Seoul and Pyongyang, with the most attention being directed to whether the two leaders will be able to sit down face-to-face in 2015. For this report, here's Hwang Sung-hee.
Under the right mood and conditions, there is no reason for us to hold back from the highest level talks. We will put our utmost efforts for practical progress in dialogue and negotiations.
The South Korean government hopes to hold any form of interKorean talks in the near future.
The two Koreas kicked off the new year by expressing their willingness for interKorean dialogue. But what's the chance of them getting back to the negotiating table? Kim Jong-un's apparent summit offer is his first since he took power in 2011, but it comes with strings attached. Seoul must halt its annual military exercises with Washington. North Korea has always protested the drills, which take place between February and March. South Korea says it has no plans to cancel the exercises this year. Kim also stressed Pyongyang will not give up its nuclear program, pledging to stick to the so-called Pyongjin policy, or the dual development of nuclear arms and the economy. Still, analysts say the North Korean leader has shown a strong determination to talk with the South, and they expect the regime to propose various forms of dialogue. This as Kim seeks to end Pyongyang's diplomatic isolation by reaching a breakthrough with Seoul. President Park will also want to make some progress with the North in her third year in office. But analysts say South Korea must first test North Korea's sincerity before jumping back into talks. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
While the U.S. government reiterates its support for improved interKorean ties, there's skepticism among American experts over Kim Jong-un's possible summit offer. They warn policymakers in Seoul and Washington to take the young leader's words with a pinch of salt. For more, here's Kim Myung-gil.
U.S. experts have cautioned against getting too carried away with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's New Year's address, in which he called for a major shift in interKorean ties. They question his sincerity, as Kim made clear that Pyongyang has no intention of backing away from its nuclear ambitions. U.S. pundits say that Seoul and Washington will only come back to the negotiating table if North Korea shows a willingness to denuclearize. The Brookings Institution, a conservative U.S. think tank, says Seoul and Washington should be cautious when yielding to any new demands or when trying to bring North Korea back to the negotiating table, as it could entail excessive costs. The Center for Strategic and International Studies says it's too early to evaluate Pyongyang's stance and that South Korea should wait for possible talks with the North in January. Some U.S. experts say Pyongyang is trying to deflect the international community's concerns about its human rights problems by issuing conciliatory gestures to South Korea. Diplomatic sources in Washington say a willingness from North Korea to dismantle its nuclear program must come before talks, but added the recent Sony Pictures hacking will negatively affect the issue. Kim Myung-gil, ARIRANG News.
President Park Geun-hye is scheduled to hold a New Year's ceremony later this afternoon. Attention is being drawn to whether she will give a response to North Korea's mention of an interKorean summit. Now, this as President Park had expressed her determination to improve Seoul's relations with Pyongyang during her New Year's address on Wednesday. Some 200 figures, including the Prime Minister, the National Assembly Speaker, and senior lawmakers from the rival parties, will attend today's meeting. The president is also expected to call for support for her 3-year economic innovation plan and other key policy initiatives for the new year. And there's another event from the presidential office to look out for. It's President Park's New Year's press conference, speculated to take place in mid-January. Watchers say the president will again focus on ways to revitalize the economy. Son Jung-in reports.
The presidential office is making its final preparation for the upcoming New Year's press conference by President Park Geun-hye. The format is expected to be similar to last year, so she will likely first lay out her plans and policy directions for 2015 before answering questions from reporters. Considering the circumstances at the National Assembly, the conference is expected to take place around January 12th. President Park will likely express her strong will to revitalize the economy through innovation and regulatory reforms. She is also forecast to focus on the current status of reform in sectors related to labor, finance, pensions, and public institutions.
깨끗하고 안전하고 신뢰할 수 있는 사회로 나아가기 위해 오랫동안 쌓여온 적폐를 해소하는 일도 흔들림 없이 추진할 것입니다.
With this year marking the 70th anniversary of the nation's independence from Japan's colonial rule, she will also address peace on the Korean peninsula by trying to speed up the process of reunification and normalizing inter-Korean relations. In regards to the recent allegations that one of her former aides meddled in state affairs, some pundits say she will put the accusations aside since she already said they were unfounded rumors. Others, however, say the president may use the opportunity to demonstrate her will to shake up her inner circle of aides. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
In the year 2012, for Korea was at its record high.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul.
Shopping market thinks the true meaning of creation shines through. The #1 priority for Korean Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan this year will be pushing for structural reforms. He says without those changes, the Korean economy will face disastrous consequences. For this story, here's Hwang Ji-hye.
Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan has pledged to do his best to push through structural reforms that he says are not only critical for the Korean economy, but inevitable. In his New Year's address, he said Korea would fail to create more jobs and provide more welfare benefits without the reforms. He added the government will not ignore the fact that younger, unemployed people believe they're not needed, that 1 out of every 3 employees is a temporary worker, and that retired baby boomers are rushing to open small businesses in sectors that are already highly competitive. Choi said the problems stem from structural issues in the economy like an inflexible labor market, an imbalance between exports and domestic demand, a shrinking workforce due to the aging population and low birth rates, and the decreased competitiveness of major manufacturers. Choi also said the Korean economy could also struggle just as the Eurozone and Japanese economies have if the government fails to meet its reform goals. In his overall evaluation of last year, the finance minister said the domestic economy managed to lay the foundation for structural reforms through aggressive expansionary policies. He added that Korea also received better sovereign ratings than Japan while expanding its free trade reach into countries like China. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
On New Year's Day, cigarette prices in Korea nearly doubled to about $4. The government says it aims to bring down the nation's smoking rate with the price hike, coupled with more areas being designated as non-smoking zones. Kwon So-ah reports.
Where there was once a variety of cigarette brands of different styles and flavors, the shelves at many convenience stores stand stripped bare. This, as smokers were busy grabbing as many cigarette packs as they could before the price nearly doubled on New Year's Day. This scramble shows that most smokers in Korea are not planning on kicking the habit, as it is the government's plan. While some question whether the newly inflated prices will have a long-term effect on habitual smokers, many researchers believe the policy will encourage people to stop out smoking.
General scientific evidence shows that for every 10% price hike, the smoking rate drops by around 4%. And since the government has followed through with other anti-smoking policies as well, I expect the number of smokers to decrease.
Those other policies are to do with where smokers can light up. Smoking is now banned in all restaurants, cafes, and bars regardless of their size. In cafes, chairs and tables have disappeared from smoking areas, meaning customers will be allowed to smoke in a designated zone, but they will not be allowed to eat or drink while doing so.
Smokers say they pay their taxes and the high cigarette prices and that this is too much. Some just leave without buying a coffee.
Even though they do not contain tobacco and are usually odorless, electronic cigarettes are also subject to the ban. Although the new rules came into effect on January 1st, there will be a grace period of 3 months, giving smokers and businesses time to adapt. For smokers, they'll be left with a simple choice: put up with the strict new rules or stop once and for all. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
Authorities in China have launched an investigation into Chinese IP addresses that are believed to be the source of the recent hacking attack on South Korea's nuclear plant operator. This comes after the Korean government asked relevant agencies in China to help identify the possible culprits behind the attack. Now, the addresses were located in the northeastern Chinese city of Shenyang. That's where North Korean hackers are widely thought to operate from. It's still not clear who was behind the hack that leaked the personal data of employees at South Korea's nuclear agency, as well as blueprints of nuclear reactors. Korean officials may be dispatched to Shenyang if China confirms that the hack attack was launched from the city. China's leader has ordered a probe into the stampede that claimed nearly 40 lives on New Year's Eve in Shanghai. The exact cause has not been identified, but local police do say that it wasn't because of some fake money thrown from a nearby nightclub. Kim Min-ji tells us more.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has ordered a probe into a stampede that killed dozens in Shanghai on New Year's Eve. The incident happened about 25 minutes before midnight in the city's Bund district, where thousands of people had gathered to count down to the new year. At least 36 people, many of them students, were killed and dozens more were injured. President Xi has called for all-out efforts to attend to those affected, while ordering local governments around the country to make sure such accidents do not happen again. The investigation will likely focus on whether there were enough police officers to control the huge crowds. Chinese media reports that nearly 300,000 turned up in Shanghai for celebrations last year. The injured, many of which have been hospitalized, recalled the accident.
I was hanging around the Bund district when it happened. I remember standing on a step and then passing out all of a sudden. When I woke up, I was lying on the ground.
There was a woman next to me who had been helping me all the way. She told me not to fall down. I guess I would have died if I had fallen down.
Shanghai police denied social media reports that the stampede was triggered by people trying to pick up fake cash dropped from the balcony of a nearby nightclub. Police say the bills were thrown after the stampede took place. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
A funeral has been held for the first victim identified from the AirAsia flight that crashed into the Java Sea 6 days ago. The body of a 49-year-old passenger was handed over to her family on Thursday at a ceremony in the Indonesian city of Surabaya. 10 bodies have reportedly been recovered so far, but bad weather continues to hamper the search for the victims and the plane's black box. It's unclear what brought down the plane with 162 passengers on board. Citing investigators, Reuters reports that the pilot may have climbed above the clouds too steeply while trying to avoid a storm. Now, 2014 was a torrid year for Syria as it lost more than 75,000 people to its civil war. The worst part is that the killings are expected to continue this year as strikes by the Islamic State militants and sectarian violence in Iraq show little sign of easing. Connie Kim has this report.
2014 was the deadliest year in the four-year-long Syrian civil war. The UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says more than 76,000 people were killed in the nation last year. And more than 17,000 of that total were civilians, including 3,500 children. The civil war, which started as an uprising against Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, has now become a multi-front conflict, one that opened the door for the rise of the Islamic State militant group. The loss of life, however, isn't expected to decline anytime soon. 17 U.S.-led airstrikes were carried out on Thursday on IS-controlled buildings in the Syrian cities of Raqqa and Kobani. And marking the new year, Syrian President Assad made a rare visit to the front lines of the war in Jobar, east of Damascus. He visited government troops there to encourage them in their fight. Jobar is a former rebel stronghold, and the Syrian government has been trying to oust insurgents from the city in recent months. More than 200,000 people have been injured or killed since the Syrian conflict broke out in March 2011, and nearly half of the nation's population has been displaced. 3.2 million people have fled to the neighboring countries seeking asylum. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
With the year 2014 behind us now, this will be a good time to take stock of the local film industry. It was another strong year, but not without its ups and downs. Here to give us an overview is our film critic, Piers Conran. Good afternoon, Piers.
Good afternoon and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, too. So one of the first things that people look at, of course, is the numbers. So can you guide us through the final figures of 2014?
Absolutely. So as you said, it's been another very big year for the industry. We had Korean films topped 100 million admissions for the third time running. Now that is a huge number that represents on an average of 2 sales to Korean films for every citizen in the country. And on overall, the industry reached 215 million. However, it was the biggest year on record for the exhibition industry as a whole. And while Korean films are very strong, it wasn't as strong as the last 2 years. So the total was 108 million, but last year, which is the record holder, was 127 million. Beyond that, looking at the market share, which is to say is how strong are local films compared to foreign films, it looked like it was going to fall short of that 50% mark. And because it's been a very strong year for foreign films. Actually, it's the first year that foreign films have gone over 100 million. But a strong push towards the end of the year with a few major local hits did put it just over the mark, literally 50.1%. So that's the 4th time in a row that the industry has had a market share majority.
So it was a strong year indeed. So what were some of the big hits that drove audiences to go to the theaters?
Well, there were a number of major hits this year, but of course 3 in particular are singled out because of course they crossed the big 10 million admissions barrier. In fact, it's the first time we've had 3 films cross that barrier. The record was 2 before. And so number 1 by a very wide margin is of course Roaring Currents, which did roar all the way to 17.6 million admissions, which is the biggest success of all time in the Korean film industry, not just for a Korean film, but films overall, and by a large margin. The next one is 4 million admissions lower. And beyond that, we had then 2 foreign films that went over the 10 million mark, and those are the second and third to ever do that. At the beginning of the year, we had the Disney animation Frozen, and towards the end of the year, the major sci-fi Interstellar, which, as you know, I'm a very big fan of.
Yes.
Beyond that, the next big hits were Korean, and those were Miss Granny and The Pirates, each with about 8.7 million admissions. However, I could say we might be seeing a 4th film from 2014 hitting the 10 million admissions mark, with Ode to My Father doing so strong at the moment.
Right. So any events in particular that affected the local industry in 2014?
Well, I think the most significant event over the year, not just for the film industry, but the country as a whole, of course, was the very tragic Seoul incident. From a business perspective, immediately following that event, the theater owners were hit quite hard as attendance lowered a lot. A lot of people weren't in the mood to go to the cinema, which is, of course, a very, very normal reaction to that crisis. Other events were affected. The Jeonju International Film Festival, which took place only a few weeks later, was very much more of a muted affair. Parties were canceled. VIP things were canceled across the country. So it did kind of shake the industry. But there was also a lot of people worrying about how 3 of the 4 major films coming out in that kind of peak July-August time would be affected, since they all took place on boats.
So the Roaring Currents and the Pirates.
Yes.
And there's another one.
Yeah.
Which I can't remember.
No problem. So we have, first of all, of course, Roaring Currents, this huge success. The film always looked like it was going to do very well, based on this kind of, national hero that everyone knows about. Chae Min-sik is in it, some very fancy effects. But no one could have expected just how well it would do. And many speculated, including I, that the film went some way towards kind of restoring wounded pride in the wake of the Seoul tragedy. So people kind of flocked to that. It was kind of, in a sense, in an odd way, a feel-good film again. And also it's a film about leadership. And in these kind of times, people feel that there's kind of some people feel there's a lack of strong leadership in the country. So this film kind of went some way to kind of showing that. Then The Pirates was honestly another film I did not expect to do that well, but it was a very light, diverting entertainment. And again, in these heavy times, it seemed that was just the tickets. But the third film, which had a very reverse outcome, was Haemu. A film I'm very, very
the one that you
to.
said was you really liked it, but
yes,
then
I think
the
it's a
critics
terrific
didn't really.
film. And critics liked it generally.
Critics liked it, but the audience didn't really like it that
well,
much.
audiences didn't go and see it because the film it's a very, very dark naval thriller, and it had some very unfortunate parallels with the incident. I mean, people dying within a boat, the boat sinking, and it's a very dark social drama. Inevitably, it really hurt the film, and very, very few people were ready to go and see it.
Okay, let's move on and shift gears here a bit. So any major trends that you noticed last year in the local film industry?
I mean, the industry has grown so large that it's hard to identify, very kind of major trends across the industry at large. But I would say that there's been something of a lack of genre diversity this year. We've seen a huge amount of period films and also loads and loads of thrillers. The thrillers have kind of met with mixed success. Some doing well.
Last year, right?
2014. Sorry, my head's still stuck there.
Everybody's head's still stuck there.
But definitely, period films are the hottest thing right now. There were 6 of them last year. Most of them, were huge hits. And I think this genre diversity is a little troubling because I think studios are getting a little complacent about thinking they know what audiences want, and the industry is still doing very well. But if they don't kind of keep their guard up, it might hurt returns in the future.
So, what would you say? What were your favorite films of 2014?
Well, there were a lot of films I really enjoyed. I will say that most of my favorite films were independent films this year, not so much the mainstream ones, so there were a few I enjoyed a lot. But my favorite, I think, would have to be A Girl at My Door, which was a smaller film that went to the Cannes Film Festival and opened here in May. It stars Bae Joon-han and Kim Se-ron. They lead a really terrific cast. It's a wonderful drama by announcing a major new talent in July Jung. So I thought that was a terrific movie. Then, of course, there is a documentary called A Dream of Iron, which premiered at Berlin and screened at a few festivals here. A really wonderful, like a hypnotic, artistic vision of kind of a shipbuilding down at the Hyundai shipyard. So really, really fantastic film. And then, of course, if I were to pick a third, I'd probably throw in Haemu. As you know, I'm a fan.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much, Pierce. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have left for today. Thank you for your valuable insights, as always.
My pleasure. Thanks.
It's another freezing cold day here in Korea. I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. We have a variety of advisories in effect right now across the nation, and some of the upper regions such as Gangwon-do and Seoul are under a cold wave advisory with low temperature readings and even lower wind chills. And then we have this dry weather advisories near the edges of the east coast and a heavy snow advisory in effect for some parts of Chungcheongnam-do and Jeollado provinces. Now, these regions can expect total accumulation of up to 5 centimeters, while others are expecting less than 1. And taking a look at our readings for today, Seoul will peak to -1 this afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan peaks a bit higher at 4 and 5 degrees. And to other regions, Jeju Island peaks to 8, Dokdo hits -1, while Mount Gyeongbuk is going to be much colder at -6 degrees. Well, that's all for now. Michelle Park, I hope you have a wonderful day.
And that's ARIRANG News for now. Thanks for watching. We'll be back with more updates at 4 p.m. Korea time.